Hello and welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and today is episode 38, Immortal Passwords versus Vulnerable Humans. Our guest today is Lee Cheddar, Senior Product Manager at Serbi, and Gautam Dev, CEO and co-founder of Genix Cyber. So before we dive into this, Lee, you're the guest. Could you give us a quick intro on your background?
Sure thing, and I appreciate you setting this up. This is going to be a fun conversation. I'm Lee Cheddar. I've been working in IT security for 20 plus years. I was a security architect for Fortune 500 companies. I consider myself now a recovering security architect. I did sales engineering at Okta, as well as corporate development, strategic alliances and partnerships, integrations, all sorts of different things over my 8 years working at Okta, and then joined Serbi about a year ago. And I'm currently running our platform product components. So our core engine, our directory services integration, so all of our IDP, SCIM, SAML, OADC, plus our kind of scalability and overall underlying AWS and global scale strategy. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
And Gautam, we've known each other for a number of years.
Yeah,
Maybe can you tell us a little bit about your background and your company?
yeah, sure, Mike. Thanks. I started in Australia around about 95, 96. I was part-time masters and working on what used to be the SSL EAY libraries to kind of have a second, kind of dimension to encryption at that time. So my background essentially has been PKI. They are now OpenSSL. And then I did some international consulting. That brought me to the US in 98 and was a lead engineer for VeriSign. And started my services journey with Deloitte as one of the early members of the identity practice there. And since then, a number of service providers have built a few ventures around security with identity as the core, and built a few products and got them on the magic quadrant, or where you find visibility in this market today, right? And spent some time at Ernst and Young and helped another identity provider or leading identity provider with the partner strategy. And now CEO Genix Cyber. So being part of the product world and the services world. So I said, hey, now is the time to kind of put all the experience together and do both of the things at the same time. So here we are, a cybersecurity firm. We'll be coming out with a product this week, and that there's more about that on my LinkedIn page. So thanks, Mike.
So, Lee, our topic today is immortal passwords versus vulnerable humans. I think a lot of our identity audience really is familiar with this challenge of the attack surface area of passwords and the weakest link being humans, and even being end consumers of this nightmare. And I myself have a password file that's probably 100 or 150 lines long. Um, but maybe you could tell us, I think it would be interesting to hear about Serbi. On LinkedIn, Serbi says, securely manage access to all your apps, no exceptions, with the first and only comprehensive access management platform. And if I can, maybe can I quickly also show this diagram, or should I wait on the diagram?
No, go ahead.
Okay, let's do the diagram. Um, So this diagram was helpful for me. This is off the main website, and it shows basically IDPs as step one. So I guess I'm a company, I'm an enterprise, I connect my IDP. And then it shows service providers like LinkedIn or TikTok, which I don't normally think of as apps that my employees would want to log into through Okta or Ping. Um, and then basically, I guess it shows me getting access um, to maybe this thing that I wouldn't normally consider as an enterprise application. Um, but maybe can you tell us a little bit about what's Serbi about, and how do you actually control access to the rest of these applications?
For sure. And uh, your comments about like LinkedIn and TikTok are totally on point, because when I was interviewing here, when I was thinking about joining, it was like, okay, so it's like a social media manager. Is that what this is about? Uh, but then, after learning a bit more about it, now after working here for a year, uh, one of the stories I was telling when I was at Identiverse was, exactly your point. If I work in the business and I go to IT, if I go to security, if I go to the identity team and I say, I need to integrate Facebook, what's the immediate response? No, just no.
I think I would tell my company, screw off, man.
I
That's
mean,
not your account.
like, no, like, not one, I can't, because it doesn't
Yeah.
support anything. And two, it's Facebook. So like, no, I'm not going to do that. But the business, right? So I'm very pragmatic about the relationship between the business and security and identity and all of that. And the business looks at Facebook and says, I spend $10 million a month at a large enterprise on this platform. I don't know who has access. I don't know when they're logging in. I don't know if MFA is turned on. I don't know who has what role. I don't have any of that context. And IT isn't willing, because from their perspective, it's a willing to help me. And so if I'm the business user, I look at this as a super critical thing. There's millions of dollars in cash flowing through this for all intents and purposes. And I need agencies to have access, or ad agencies and partners. I need employees. I need contractors. I need influencers, potentially, if they're going to do a live stream with me, if I'm working with a large global brand. Those are the things that are top of mind for the business that IT is not thinking about.
Yeah. And Gautam, well, maybe we can pivot to you, but there was recently, I guess I read this morning that it might have been Roger Stone's email,
Mhm.
or not Roger Stone was targeted,
Mhm.
um, and so you can say, well, yeah, these third party apps maybe are, that we consider outside the domain, are still fair game for attackers to get access. But do you have any thoughts on this problem of, like, all the other things that employees might connect to? Is this a real problem?
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, from a point of view of what you share, brand protection, all of that kind of comes into picture there, right? I mean, what exactly are you sharing on the social platform as an employee? On the reverse side, the Roger Stone episode, I think that one of the toughest jobs, as we work towards getting rid of passwords, I think the third party and the external identities and are kind of are going to be, for adaptability, the most difficult identities to be integrated with. For how many times do we get challenged for a pass key, or whichever way you authenticate using a passcode, or your face, or thumbprint, or whatever that might be. So how often would a customer or a third party, which is a small medium business, lack of all of that technology prowess, and time is of the essence. Look, I gotta go to 5 stores, so I gotta quickly jump through one to another. um, so that, in my mind, becomes a complexity for usability. And still, the third party and external population is the biggest source for breaches today, right? And uh, and and monitoring both ways becomes essential, right? If your employees are kind of dishing out information that on social media, if I guess the question for Lee, though, as a follow up, if you don't mind, is that when I'm connecting to LinkedIn, is that my the enterprise social media page or setup, or is it going to be my my personal LinkedIn page or Facebook? Yeah.
Mhm. And that's exactly where this stuff gets really complicated. And this is where, so I like puzzles, I like problems, and that's good and bad. But in many cases, these social platforms, to manage the business account, those that ad spend and everything else, you use your personal profile. You are invited in your personal profile to the business account, and you perform actions on behalf of the business using my, LinkedIn, personal LinkedIn account.
Yeah.
And so I need to know that my employee or my contractor's LinkedIn account has MFA turned on. I want them to use a strong password. So I may want them to vault the password with me so that I know that it's a good password. I may want to even force rotation on their passwords, even if it's their personal account. Now they
Mhm.
still need to be able to get access to it. So there's some complications there, right? I need to make sure that this personal work balance is maintained. And so, talking to these platforms, they're very focused on bot prevention, fraud prevention, and everything else. So creating work profiles with a separate email address. If you create a fake profile using your work email address and you don't post on it, and you
Mhm.
don't comment, and you don't do anything, you'll get banned.
Yeah.
It's got
So
to be your account, no doubt, especially. Um, but I have a question for you about so let's just take password rotation policy, which I think is a terrible policy, but it's still on a lot of people's checklists for SOC 2 or ISO 27K. So now a website decides they're going to make me change my password. So it sounds like you're implying that maybe we could rotate the person's password for them, sort of like a password manager. Um, so I guess what's the delta is Survey basically a type of password manager then?
sure, I mean, you could look at it that way, but it's not our goal, right? My end goal isn't just to be a password vault for you. What I
Yeah.
want to do is take a lot of this manual, human, interactive, annoying, frustrating, like Gotham said, that these I get prompted all the time. I need to enter another code. I need to wait for an SMS to arrive. I have to check my email. Well, we'll receive the SMS for you. We'll set up a virtual phone number. We'll capture that SMS. We'll fill it for you, so you don't have to
Yeah.
wait for it. Which also solves the shared account problem.
Mhm.
If I go to social media, if I go to Twitter, I only get one phone number. And if I have 5 people that need to log in, well, do they all have to like wait for Bob to be in the office so they can get the number from Bob? Like that doesn't make any sense. And so we'll set up a shared number for all of those people, and they can all get logged in. And the social account or business account, right? You mentioned like a Zoho or a Monday or any of these other applications, um, has MFA on it. There's been a ton of social accounts that were breached because they didn't have turned on because they can't. They feasibly can't. MFA is intended and designed by these platforms for a single user, one user to get in. And as soon as you need 5 people to get into that account, you just turn off MFA. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we do that at Glue for some accounts where we share some accounts and we had to disable MFA because they're getting too good at it. I guess people like us are teaching them how to do passkeys, and it's hard to share. Um, I don't know, Gautam, coming from the PKI background, though, I think you'll understand that part of this friction is actually needed to ensure the identity of the person.
Mhm.
What's the trade-off here between usability and security? Any thoughts about like, is this are we giving up too much maybe by automating? Or what are the potential downsides for us here of trying to make this easier for people to authenticate in the background?
Yeah, great point. I mean, that's been a point of debate for a number of years. I see a question in the chat as well as why not in 20 years have we still solved the problem of passwords, right? And accounts getting breached. But so to that point, and the question that you asked, right? Do you? I mean, if, again, I'll consider the external population and our external identities, customers, partners, whatever it is, right? And try and understand, I mean, how they would use this, say FIDO, for instance, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you do have an option for passcodes to validate yourself, right? It's what are passcodes, right? You still got to type something, right?
Yeah,
So
most implementations are offering alternatives, even if they are offering passkeys, and you're
yeah,
only as strong as your weakest authentication mechanism.
right, but that's what I'm saying. For the external population, they go take the easy way out, whichever is the easiest and doesn't take time for them to get you in, right? Especially if you are trying to visit 5 sites in a day or in a limited amount of time. So I think the usability and security dilemma, or one versus the other will go away when this whole what I like to call is this identity bubble, or identity, an extended identity persona kind of starts taking place. It's kind of an extension of the self-sovereign identity fundamentals. But point being, you, along with your surroundings, if I can call it that, the whole aroma of an identity would be recognized in some shape or form as knowledge based, or for logging you in, right? So it would have elements of biometrics, it would have elements of other patterns around you and surroundings. We do location.
Behavioral and contextual, and
Exactly. And also, maybe if you're from a particular location from your office, right? And if you're not traveling, then what does your background look like, right? Oh, yeah. I mean, we used to
you
do.
could definitely do that on my background. It'd be pretty hard
Yeah,
to.
mine too. But no, I mean, it's going about, kind of imaging of the whole persona around you, not about just about you, right? And using that as leverage for authenticating. So and something that works out for folks that have a low are on the lower spectrum of technology prowess, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
I think what Gautam is saying is that we want some type of adaptive, sort of smarter authentication capability, which has better usability. But I come back to the question that can proving a person's identity really be automated? Like the whole point of it is that we introduce a certain amount of friction in order to make sure that we have really that person there, like the person doing something is what makes that, or I guess collecting data about the person. So let's say I enable two-factor authentication on LinkedIn
Hmm.
Mhm.
and Serby receives that SMS. Now, basically, I think what we're saying is that we've defeated two-factor, um, because we've made control of Serby basically one factor. The fact that I can show my association with Serby, that's one factor. Serby's done some stuff on the back end to defeat the two-factor, but they've logged it to show that I'm compliant.
Sure.
Um, so is there some type of like friction here between making it easier for the user, but actually proving it's that person? And is that trade-off worth it for a securities perspective for enterprises?
Well, and to be very clear, I'm a huge proponent of two factor. I'm also a huge proponent of not being prompted for two factor 37 times a day, which
Yeah.
is the situation that most of us are in right now, even us in security professionals and everything else. OpenID Connect and SAML have made this experience work really well for enterprise applications. I get prompted once, maybe a few times a day by my IDP. If I take a sensitive action or access a sensitive app, I may get prompted again. But my identity provider is the one making those decisions across all of my enterprise applications. each one of those enterprise applications doesn't need its own policy anymore. It doesn't have its own controls. Now, it may still do some things, but realistically, the identification of the user is the responsibility of the identity provider. And I want to take the same approach for non-federated applications. Your identity provider has vetted you and determined that you should have access to Serbi. And if you should have access to Serbi, I can even do a callback to Okta or Azure and verify that you're still good. You were good an hour ago. Maybe
As Gautam points out, hopefully is continuing to gather data so that we really do know that it's you.
Yeah, it's still
so
you.
I guess you have two jobs, because you have to really, you're going to make it easier for the user, but you have to have enough data so that you actually know it's the user.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's still the user, right? Because there's multiple stages to this. I know it was the user an hour ago. Is it still the user, right? Has their IP address changed? Has their user agent changed? Has their anything changed? If none of that has changed, it's probably still the same person. There's some pretty simple data points you can use to say it's probably still the same person, especially now that a lot of us work from home. It tend to have a pretty static presence today. And so, just looking at some of those basic things, but all of as far as I'm concerned, and this is my opinion, and I'm here because I have strong opinions. I said that on LinkedIn. The user friction around MFA is the reason that everyone complains about security. And they're so tired of it. They're exhausted by it. And it's that constant, oh my God, another thing.
people complain about the weather too. Doesn't mean we can fix it.
Well,
but we can fix this, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
I can't fix the weather yet. I'm working on that too. That's a side project. But I can fix this, and I can make the user experience much more like a federated application. And I can take a lot of the work and expectation of work off of the user. If the app has a password rotation policy, the user, maybe you can't even turn it off. There's some applications that's not even setting you can change. And so I'll just rotate it for you. Don't worry about it. Like, that shouldn't be your problem. That's not your problem to solve as a user. Let's automate that. Why ask you to do another thing and another thing? Let's make security work better for the humans.
Right.
And make it just a better experience for everybody. Like, that has to be part of our story, part of our goals. Because otherwise,
so in the trade-off, user experience versus security, but are you giving up security?
No, you don't have to. And that's the whole thing is there. This is where I say I'm a recovering security architect. There's always been this perspective that anytime I improve usability, security goes down. And I don't think that's true. I really don't. I think you can have good usability. Now, not necessarily unlimited usability, not infinite, but you can have security and usability as more of an equal thing, as long as you're realistic about it and you really think about the human experience. You have to take the perspective of a user, not looking at a NIST guideline, not writing a policy that no human can actually follow, and actually go, hey, I'm going to expect the user to do MFA 31 times a day. And I think that's achievable.
Right. If I can chime in real quick, Mike, I think that's an important point that I've been talking about for years now. See, we see the whole identity and access industry as two spectrums, identity provider and service provider. I think there's a third spectrum required, which is the trust provider. And I think what Serbi is trying to do is be that trust provider, right? Through doing that. But then in that case, there needs to be an establishment of trust somehow. So you need to be, I mean, I'm not saying you probably have a massive amount of security and all of that around the whole OTP, scenario that you mentioned. But just as a general trust provider, you should be able to certify that trust in some way, shape, or form. Okay, these are the parameters that allow me to be a trust provider, right? And certify to you when you register that I will be your trust provider. Now, if we can establish those fundamentals and have this third spectrum called the trust provider, I think that that would be start of a way out, right? So
I think that's true. The Serbi really is we're trusting Serbi basically to take care of authentication for us. So we're in a way delegating. Um, what one of my whenever I think about these types of problems, I wonder about the impact of phishing. Um, if I'm using my company's using Serbi, do I get any more protection from phishing? Does Serbi know, well, I shouldn't be entering my LinkedIn credentials to this non-LinkedIn thing?
So anybody who knows me knows that I tend to be uh, uh, irritating. I'm going to use that word because I like to push boundaries. I like to test things. And so a few months back, actually, I went and registered a Serbi domain that looks very similar to our real domain that we didn't own. And I just was curious and I went and found it and I bought it. Cost me, $11. And then
Serbi.fun.
I went and stood up Evil Engine X, or Evil Gen X, because it's great. It's a super cool platform. And
Uh-huh.
I actually created our Okta login page on my phishing domain. And the domain looked very similar to our Okta login page. It actually is a proxy to our real Okta login page.
mhm.
And then I took one of our customer success emails that my boss, the CEO, the founder, receives 100 of every day and reads 100 of every day because he's very customer centric. And I edited it a little bit and I sent him a phishing email that looked really good. And he clicked on it and he opened it and he went to the phishing site. And you know why he didn't log in? Because he's lazy. It didn't automatically fill in the credentials. And honestly, there is an aspect of all of this, especially in credential based applications, that if users get into the habit of, I don't have to type this in anymore, when I have to type it in, it's annoying. And I'm like, and it forces them to think about it, forces them to pause. One of the things that is the most effective tactic when you talk about phishing education and all of that is getting people to pause and think about it instead of just autopiloting through the whole process.
Mhm.
And as soon as they get to the page that they've seen 1,000 times and their credentials don't fill in for them automatically like it's done 999 times, they pause.
Mhm.
And I didn't get my boss's credentials because of that. And then I slacked him and I said, I almost got you because Evil Genix captured all this data for me. Uh, and and he said that was really good. And he
So it
said
helps phishing.
it helps because if you help people set the expectation that they don't have to type in credentials 50 times a day, they don't have to do another OTP 50 times a day. They, just like with SAML, just with OADC, they start to get more suspicious when they have to type it in.
Um, Gautam, I have another question, but any thoughts before I move on to the next topic?
No, he's right. I mean, in a way, because yeah, I mean, if I have, and that's where the password managers work, right? So, because they would not recognize the domain and automatically fill up your. So again, that is a red flag, right? And there should be, you have all these extensions for your antivirus, anti whatever these days, malware software, right? And they should be able to track the fact that, look, if something is not normal, there is a normal way to tell a story, but and you could tell the same story, but it's with a slight diversion. So what's the delta, right? And those should be red flags. In this case, password not being filled automatically. The whole process of sending an email, getting someone to pay you money because you believe it's coming from the CEO. I got one email this morning for one of my employees saying, "Hey, I want to change my bank account number for my payroll, right?
I get those all the time.
can can
Yeah.
can, can I go ahead and do it? I said, no. First, what we do is we need your bank account number so that we can draw something out of it to check the validity of it.
Ask them for
Before,
their bank account. I love it.
yeah. So, I mean some of that you have to read between the lines, right? What is a normal story, what is a normal way. Again, behavior comes into play there too, right? How does the employee write? How does the employee normally communicate via email? Will he do this? Would he just have slacked me or Teams message?
Yeah.
But yeah, so a break in the story could be or should be a red flag. Yeah.
I actually, so can I, if I just have one gripe, if you're in the financial services industry, don't send me an email with the links in it. Like, why is Amex or Chase Bank sending me? We should be training customers not to click on things. If you're my bank, please don't send me like links to click on, because I'd rather go to the website anyway. But switching actually topics, I wanted to ask you about governance,
Hmm.
um, because every big company and third party now has to comply with SOC 2 or ISO 27K in order to basically do business. So compliance is a big deal. One of the things that's interesting is that I guess by using a platform like Serbi, you can assure compliance with a wider swath of applications.
Mhm.
But Lee, what does that say about the current compliance? Are companies just saying yes, we're compliant, but they're ignoring 200 applications that are business critical that get, where I could transact for my company on social media, et cetera?
Yeah. So yeah, so the first half here we've been talking about IAM, right?
Yeah,
And if you flip this to the IGA side, it's a mess. It's ugly in most organizations, and that's just the reality of it. You don't. It's a very difficult problem, to be very clear. And
Mhm.
there's some industry leading technologies out there that have built super amazing integrations with 100, 200, 300, 400 applications. Well, what about the rest of the internet, which is a lot? And so those challenges are real, and our customers feel that. And so what I want to be able to do is productize the collection of that data across a set of applications, a very broad set of applications, to be able to collect whatever information I have, right? What roles do people have? Maybe what licenses they have, maybe what groups they're in. Different apps have different data sets, and I want to be able to normalize that. And I want to be able to do that as a product, not a service, not an SI, because it's impossible to expect an SI to do 200 boutique integrations
Mhm.
for somebody. And then that only works for that one company because the next company has 200 different applications and 200 different apps. It is incredible. You mentioned Fiserv, right? Fiserv is really bad at this, and in fact, there's some legislation that we've been discussing in Congress around, is screen scraping even acceptable in
right.
2024? Do we actually need to have finally APIs? Like, we're talking about that now in 2024, going, hey, maybe we should have APIs. And
Yeah,
that's where the
yeah.
open
So
standard and
before we get to sovereign credentials, could we at least have OAuth so I don't have to so
right,
QuickBooks doesn't have to screen scrape my bank?
correct.
But you guys are using that because there's no other way to do it, though, right?
We will if we
So
need to.
ultimately,
Absolutely, yeah. And again, I'm on the product side, and my vision, my plan for all of this is do what's necessary. Maybe there's a private API, maybe there is a public API, but it sucks. There's a lot of public APIs that suck.
yeah,
Uh, maybe it's a screen scraping. Maybe it's a CLI tool. Maybe there's an SDK. Let's look at the broader set of what's possible and how we can connect to this system before we say, oh, it has to be a screen scrape or it has to be skim, which is the pretty much the two options that everybody has looked at up to this point.
yeah. Well, yeah, I heard there's something like 60,000 SaaS B2B SaaS applications now. It's really up there. And so I guess most of those are, from an enterprise perspective, are probably support federated identity at this point, SAML or OpenID.
No.
But I know that still leaves you with a lot of websites that don't have it. You think less
Oh,
of them?
I would say out of those 60,000, 3 or 4,000 support federation.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. That's a really nice way of putting it, Mike.
Yeah. So, what type? So, the question for a trusted sort of path, it's, you remind me a little bit of this company called Passbolt in Europe. They specialize in privileged access management for development teams. So if you're holding the keys to the kingdom, you really need to protect that. What are the authentication mechanisms that that Serbia itself uses? Is it relying on my Okta or my Azure AD, or does Serbia add any authentication on top of that to say, well, because this is so many applications, I need to maybe use passkeys or something? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, I spent 8 years at Okta, and near and dear to my heart is identity providers
Hmm.
are really good at this. They're really good at identifying the human at the keyboard. Like, that's their role, right? Biometrics, as Gotham had said, we should be able to use whatever mechanisms are available to us, whether that's a smartphone or a YubiKey. That flexibility and that really smart intelligence should exist at the front door at your identity provider. Once you get into a downstream application, this is actually where things get interesting. And I worked with the OpenID Foundation on the shared signals framework,
Sure.
because I think that there needs to be a continuous communication channel between the identity provider and the applications to say, hey, I saw something weird, or this changed. Like, it may not even be something bad, but like, you should know about it and make decisions about it. Those are the types of things that I think are super critical for this. And then our ability to check back in, right? Hey, Okta, is this still good? Hey, Okta, can you MFA this user again? Hey, Azure, does this comply with the continuous access policy? I want to be able to push as much of that up as I can for the Identirati audience. They're already managing all of their policies in Okta for all their federated apps. I don't want them to have an entirely new policy framework that they have to go learn, build, sync, like,
Okay. So
match.
you're going to be an RP. You're going to rely on Okta or Azure
Yeah,
to do the authentication.
as much as I can. Now, I do have to do some things on my side, right? There's absolutely things that we do around device identification, location, all of the other things you mentioned. Those are things that's just part of being a security company. We don't have a choice there. But as far as the human identification and verification, I want to push as much of that to the best possible solution. I don't want to duplicate a solution that already works really, really well.
So you're extending, in a way, your federated identity into these non-connected apps.
You got it.
Okay. Um, and this, the shared signals framework that you mentioned would be great, but none of the apps support that either.
Yeah.
Like, you want them to support federated identity. Good luck getting them to accept the signal. And then my pet peeve these days is, even if you tell somebody there's been an account breach, half of them can't revoke their tokens anyway. Or not even half of them, all of them can't revoke their tokens. So they can't do anything. You'd be like, thank you very much for the notification. I'll wait for the JWTs to expire, and then we'll let the user log in again. Is nobody can deactivate. Gautam, before I jump into the next question, any thoughts or follow-ups, or should I
Yeah, about the governance question, as such, when I talk about centralized trust provider, right, one of the functions essentially should be continuous certification or recertification, if you would. The issue with the IGA industry today is that certifications, attestations happen once in a quarter, or once in a month if they're that eager. right, at the most. But it needs to be continuous. There needs to be a bigger need for micro certifications. So, based on any anomaly, as you mentioned Lee earlier, based on device, location, time of day, n number of different policies getting messed up, right? Then you need to be able to trigger a micro certification. Now, who do you send that to, right? So you need to be able to have a point of contact for every application, for that matter, right? And then the access management tool should be able to take the signal back from this trust provider, right? The identity provider, essentially, to delay the authentication, give them some sort of a message, say, hey, look, we think this is something anomalous. We need to wait for additional approval. It can be solved, right? It might delay. Now, sometimes you might say that you need immediate access, right? So let's have a break glass kind of a process built in for that, right? And have an emergency contact for that application or something. But this is again thinking out loud, right? But I believe the only way the governance issue is going to be solved for the identity piece and the access piece is through continuous, detection and micro certification, if you would, right?
Well, and actually, to just build on top of that, one of the things that we've been very successful at is starting to delegate some of this access management, access review work to the business, right? You don't want to give your business users admin rights in Azure or Okta. They don't want admin rights in Okta or Azure. They're not platforms for them to use. But what we found is, again, I'll go back to the social media use case, which is something that's been very enlightening for me, because I walked into this going, this is this is ridiculous. Why am I talking about Facebook? But you look at this, and again, the business is spending millions of dollars, and they want to be able to see who has access, and they want to be able to perform those actions without opening tickets to help desk and waiting for IT to go do something. They don't want to manage groups and everything else in Active Directory. They don't want to do any of those IT processes. They're not IT people. They work in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's give them a really simple UI that they can manage users, permissions, roles, all the things that they want to do in their contextual application using the terminology that they understand, that they're familiar with, in the platforms that they use every day, and then allow IT to report on that and do an access certification campaign or something if you need to for those applications, but at least allow you to report, audit all of the stuff that they're doing to make sure that they're doing it well or doing it right. But we have to start giving people in the business, in the right teams, the ability to control this access. IT cannot be the gatekeeper for everything. They
Mm-hmm.
don't understand it. They're not staffed to handle thousands of applications. That mentality has to change.
I'm starting to see that why you're interested in the continuous authentication, because in a way you're in a unique position because you're seeing in a way logins for these third parties and maybe could cut off based upon this continuous flow of data. Maybe you're in a position to actually enforce some of those revocations
Sure.
of principles. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end. Maybe we could do last thoughts. Gautam, doesn't have to be on this topic. Any last thoughts before we leave?
Yeah, so two things. I already talked about the trust provider framework, right? Put that into context with a convert in the broader cyber equation, as far as a converged platform, right? To kind of do all of the things, but make it identity centric, entity centric, right? At the end of the day, a breach is caused by an identity performing an access or wrongful access of a data element, uh, uh, and, uh, uh, and 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 you need to be able to stop it. So if there's a break in that story, the only way you can tell is everything in between needs to be continuously monitored and governed, right? So it's staying informed, building security around it, continuous governance, and then building your resilience, and then you start again, right? So it's a cyclic process, I imagine, but it has to be identity and access driven. And I think the industry is, kind of understanding the importance of IAM at the after 20 years or so, right? And it's become a hot topic again for that reason. It's no more just an operations, kind of a system. So that I'll sign up with that. Yeah.
Before we call it, give the guest last thoughts. Lee, thank you for joining us. And any last thoughts before we close it?
Sure. Yeah, I I think this is a very interesting topic. I wrote this up because passwords are not going away. And I have seen. I went to RSA. I went to Identiverse. I saw all these vendors that are like passwordless, passwordless, passwordless. Your world's going to be passwordless. I think passkeys are awesome. I think FIDO2 is awesome. The reality is that we will not be passwordless because there's so many applications, there's so many use cases, there's so many just points where this idea of passwordless doesn't work. It will not work for a very long time. And so we need to accept that. And we need to have a plan for it. And we need to have a way to make that experience just suck less for the humans. I am a very human focused solution, provider, I'll call it, because I'm a human and it sucks for me. And if it sucks for me, if somebody who understands why I get challenged from MFA all these times, why I have to get all these texts, it really sucks for my mom. And that's why her Facebook account gets hacked every 2 weeks and everything else, right? Because it really sucks. And I want to make it suck less.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Next episode on Thursday, we have a discussion on blockchain and identity. And of course, we don't want to put in any identity information on a blockchain, any PII, but doesn't mean blockchains aren't useful. So we're going to have one of probably, I don't know if it's our first, but one of probably many blockchain conversations on Thursday. Audience members, please follow Identity Office Hours on LinkedIn. We're trying to get to 1,000 followers there. So just click follow on the Identity Office Hours homepage. Thanks, Lee and Gautam, for joining us. And
thank you.
we'll see